Well, thank you all for coming. It's a joy to be able to be together and to give these classes. Tonight we're going to talk about Master's pathway to inner freedom. And I want to begin by talking about the concept of freedom, because Master talks quite a lot about this, because our basic concept of it is a little bit mistaken and not very deep. In the great document, the Declaration of Independence, it says man is endowed by his Creator with certain inalienable rights, among which are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that certainly is one definition of freedom. America was coming from being oppressed by England, just as India was oppressed by England. That's one reason why America and India are so aligned in our consciousness, is because we both had to break away from being enslaved by England, by another country. And America had to do it by war, but India, through the greatness of Gandhi, was able to do it by nonviolent means. Of course, England too, in that nearly 2 centuries, had evolved, and so war wasn't as needed. But nonetheless, there was great spiritual power that Gandhiji had that allowed the freedom of India from the oppression of England to take place by nonviolent means. But just life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that won't really give us freedom. Everybody who's born in the world has life. So what the Declaration, Jefferson and other framers of that declaration, which is a great document, what they were basically saying is that no one has the right to take our life from us. That is one of our inalienable rights given to us by God. And we find still today that most of the conflicts in the world stem from someone mistakenly thinking that they have the right to take the life of another person, sometimes for religious reasons, sometimes for political reasons, for a variety of reasons. And yet, even though that's a terrible curse on the world today, still most of us don't have to fear for our lives being taken. Maybe we read in the newspaper that some attack happens or some bomb goes off or something, and it might create a little anxiety. But the reality of anyone in this room having their life taken by violent means of someone else is very slight. I read some figure that worldwide 13 out of every 1,000 deaths now happen through violence from one person to another. And so the odds are pretty good that we're going to have freedom from that. But Master wasn't really talking about that kind of freedom, because even though we have life, we're still enslaved, not necessarily by others, but also by others. As you drive around or walk around this beautiful city of Chennai, there are thousands of posters trying to enslave your consciousness. Billions and billions of dollars and rupees are being spent by somebody trying to make you feel that unless you have their product, unless you have a hero motorcycle, you can't possibly be happy. unless, of course, you want a BMW car, and then you can't possibly. So all of these influences are trying to influence our mind to make us feel that we can't be happy, the pursuit of happiness. We can't pursue happiness without somehow being influenced by somebody trying to tell us that we're lacking in our happiness, in our freedom, unless we have their goods or their services. But what Master said, so most people, I think if we took a survey and if we asked the question, how would you define freedom? I think most people would answer that by the right to do what I want to do. But doing what we want to do is actually an expression of slavery. Not to necessarily to someone else, although we may be influenced by others. But Master said that we want to have freedom, but we have already enslaved our freedom to certain habits, to certain desires, to certain samskars that we have. And so we think that we have the freedom, but we've heard more than one story, but we heard a story not too long ago of a young man who was the son of a devotee, and somehow he was at a party and somebody gave him alcohol, and he immediately after that first drink became an alcoholic. And so the freedom to drink or not to drink, people might say that that is a definition of their freedom, their inalienable right. But what kind of right is that? See, we're so enslaved by outer things that we aren't able really to express true freedom. So what is true freedom? I was just listening to a talk of Master today, and he said one definition of freedom is to do what you should do, not what you want to do. He said everybody in the world wants to do what they want to do, but that enslaves you because wants stem from desires, likes and dislikes, and I'll come back to that and explore it a little bit more. But when we do what we want to do, we're following old samskars and old patterns that we have established either earlier in this life or in past lives, and we're simply following those patterns because that's our enslavement of our consciousness. And so the freedom to do what we want to do is not right. Master said that freedom comes from doing what's right to be done. And he talked, this was in a beautiful talk at a Christmas party for his devotees. And he talked about how the day before they had a long meditation, an 8-hour meditation. And he was talking about how in that meditation, when the mind is withdrawn from the patterns of the likes and dislikes, that is the way to achieve freedom. And then he said, millions of people, he said the vast majority of people are celebrating Christmas by doing things that are not necessarily good for them, simply because they're driven by their wants. He said, when we align our desires, or when we discipline ourselves, because at first, if you have a habit pattern, if you have an addiction, let's say you have an addiction to smoking. So what is freedom? I suppose somebody could say, freedom is my right to smoke a cigarette when I want to smoke a cigarette. And nobody is going to tell me that I can't smoke. Well, that person is addicted and enslaved by not only the habitual pattern, but many, many things enslave us by chemical addictions. And so nicotine, and the tobacco companies know this very, very well, they will put ingredients in cigarettes that actually are physically addicting to our brains, so that it's very hard then to stop smoking. And many people, it's a terrible addiction. It cuts short your life, and yet many people who smoke are simply unable to stop themselves from doing that. And so these addictions happen, and they're a great, great curse in the world. Addiction to things that will hurt our health or enslave us, like drugs and alcohol, those kinds of things. And so once we get caught into that realm, then it's very hard to free ourselves. And so simply saying the right to do what I want to do doesn't define freedom, because we don't make the choice of what we want from a state of freedom. And so we have to have the state of freedom in order to do what we want to do, if it's going to be helpful to us. And so we have to discipline ourselves in order to withdraw from those things that otherwise outwardly take away our freedom. And so much of the spiritual path begins as self-discipline. And so we have to align our will with that which is right to do. Master said his highest prayer was, I will reason, I will, and I will act. But guide thou my reason, will, and activity to the right path in everything. And so what he's saying there is that we have to align what we want, align our freedom, align our will and our thoughts and our activities to the right thing. And so a real master has complete freedom and no freedom, because there isn't any ego there to want freedom to do something different from the will of God. So a master is just an expression of the will of God, or some aspect of God. Anandamoyi Ma said that she was just a kind of a condensation of the compassion of God. And did she have free will? Did she not have free will? She didn't as an ego, because there wasn't an ego there to want to have free will. So she would just do as she felt guided to do. There's a beautiful story of her. She would just wander, and many times she would just get up and go somewhere. We have known people who were disciples of hers, and they would travel, and this one couple, she would often bring them with her when she was traveling, but she would just be sitting there and say, we're going. And she would get up, and they didn't even have time to pack clothes. She would go and get on a train and go someplace. There was a story that I heard of a young man who later became a great devotee and disciple of Ma. But when he first started connecting with Ma, he saw that she kept going here and there and everywhere, and not being very uplifted yet in his consciousness. His thought was, what kind of a spiritual person is she? She's so restless. She can't even sit still. For more than a day or two, and she has to travel somewhere. What kind of a person is this? What kind of a master is this? And one time, Ma said that we are going to go to this certain place, and he was along with her. And then after they had been there a day or two, she said, let's go on a picnic. There was a nearby lake. And so they prepared food, and they walked out to this nearby lake, and they spread the blanket out and took the food out of the basket and laid it out, and were just about to eat, hadn't even had a single bite yet. And Ma said, we need to leave. And this man thought, see how she can't even sit still enough to eat. And here we can't eat either. That's probably what was really bothering the guy. But at any rate, she got up and she began walking, and so the disciples had no choice but to pack up everything and run after her. And then she came to a tree, and she stopped, and there was a boy with her, and just at that time, a little bird fell down out of the tree. And she asked the boy to pick it up and hold it up in front of her. And the boy did, and she looked into its eyes for about a minute, and then it fluttered its little wings, and it died. And she said, this is the reason that we have come to this spot, is that this soul was calling to me, and I came here to be with it in its final moments. And so here's God in the form of compassion, responding even to the desire of a little bird. Now, who knows? I mean, probably that was some high soul who had some little bit of karma, and somehow it was a divine play. Nonetheless, it's the compassion responding. Now, did Ma have freedom to go there? Not freedom to go there? Was she restless? No. But was she under control of, one might say, her own will? Yes and no. Not the egoic will, because there wasn't any I want to be enslaved with. It's our wants that enslave us. And when we're free from our wants, then we're free to do as we should do. So that's why Master was saying, let's pull away from what we want. If we use discipline to keep ourselves from doing what we want, then we can do what we should do, and that will make us ultimately free. So when we can align our will with the will of God, that's what makes us free. So for us, we should try to work to get to the point, and this is a daily practice. I always end my morning meditation by bowing to Master and praying to be in perfect attunement with him throughout the day. What I'm saying in that, I bow and I offer my will into Master's will. That's always been, for years and years, my habit of how I end my meditation. And so trying to align our will with the will of the divine, and because we don't know the will of God, it's easier to try to align our will with what we can perceive as the will of Master. Now maybe we won't perceive it correctly, but even the attempt to perceive it opens us up. Guide thou my will, reason, and activity to the right path in everything. And so we're trying to ask that Master guide us to the right path, to the right thoughts, to the right energy, to the right feelings, to everything. Swamiji constantly would refer his activities, his thoughts, his creative works to God. Master said we should, when we're beginning something, we should always pray to God. And at Ananda Village, if we start a meeting, we always start with a prayer to God. And then he said, at the end of the activity, we should pray to God, and we should pray to God in between. So basically, we should spend our time trying to align ourselves to the will of the divine to the best of our perception. And as we do that, the conflicting cross currents of ego, as Master called them, begin to lessen. And so we are more able to perceive and to stay in the flow of God's will. Now, what it really comes down to is, as Patanjali said, yogas chitta vritti nirod. Yoga is the neutralization of the vortexes of chitta, or primordial feeling, is the way Master called it. It's basically the likes and dislikes, the wants and don't wants that keep us bound. And so as we withdraw our energy from that, as we neutralize those vortexes, and it's a very, very good visual image, because some translations have called them the waves of mind stuff. And Swamiji talks about how that image, first of all, it's not mind stuff. It's chitta is the element in us of feeling, and that feeling can either express itself as pure devotion, or it expresses itself outwardly into this world as likes and dislikes. And so we're constantly up against likes and dislikes. That's why those advertisers out there are paying multi-millions of rupees to put up those posters, because they want to play on our tendency to be involved in likes and dislikes. And so they're trying to draw us in. As yogis, we're trying to pull back from that. Master said that this world is like a movie. And he said, if you go into a movie and you start watching that movie and you get kind of entranced with it, he said, of course you're going to be caught in the net of the activity of that movie. And the movies, if we were able to pull back, we would see that what the movies really try to do is play on our chitta, the feeling nature. We want to like the heroine, we dislike what's happening to him, we don't like the bad guys, we like the beautiful heroine and the hero, and we don't, and so a well done movie, if we watched it dispassionately, would be done in order to arouse the feelings of chitta. And so Master said, of course, God is the best director of all, and he's made temptation tempting. Otherwise, we wouldn't be caught. And but he said, if you go in and get caught in the movie, you're caught in the net of what that movie is trying to do. And so in this world, the more we engage in it, the more we're caught in the net of attraction, of likes and dislikes, and the less freedom we have to be able to pull back from that. And so what's the way out of this? The way out of it is there's the meditative way out, and also the kind of day-to-day, hour-to-hour practical living way out. And the outer way out is to back off a little bit from those aspects that catch us. I, for instance, used to love a certain kind of a cookie. It had a kind of a coconut, it was a sandwich cookie, coconut macaroon on both sides, toasted just perfectly, and in between a beautiful vanilla frosting. And I would sit down and eat 8 or 10 of those cookies. And I realized at one point that I was addicted to those cookies. And it wasn't like I had super willpower to be able to have one once in a while. I just decided I won't ever buy those cookies again. And I've never bought them for 25 years. I don't know, I'm probably over the addiction now. I might be able to have one and even say this doesn't taste so good. But at that time it did. And so there are certain things that each of us might be a little bit addicted to. Maybe it's watching soap operas on television. Davy and I were in an airport one time, and there was this soap opera going on the television, but the sound wasn't up, and we were too far away to see really what was happening. And all it looked like were 2 or 3 crazy people kind of shouting and gesticulating, and they were madmen and women. And, but a person who had watched that soap opera for the last 3 weeks would desperately want to know whether Sangeeta had rejected Ravi or not. And my God, the whole world must know this information. And they're shouting and gesticulating. And so it's just crazy what we get drawn into. But when we're drawn into it, it doesn't seem crazy at all. It seems necessary. And so we need to draw back a little bit from being involved too much in our likes and dislikes. And then I'll end by talking about the meditative way. Because as we meditate, Master said that we need to try to meditate deeper and deeper. And he talked about, according to different kinds of temperaments, how we're able to meditate. And he used Sanskrit terms for them, which I won't use now. But he said the first is a person who is so completely restless that their mind is completely outward. And they're always attracted to this and that and this and that. And their energy is so outward that they can't meditate. And you walk around, the vast majority of people in this city are of that type. We can give meditation classes, but they wouldn't want to come. And if they did come, they'd be too restless to meditate. Then there's a next category of people who are addicted to something in their pattern of likes and dislikes. And so they're caught in a mesh of something. It might be lust, it might be desire for wealth, it might be that they want to sleep, they don't want to put out any energy, but something has enmeshed their consciousness, and they too can't really meditate because their mind isn't free enough from being entrapped by these patterns that they have to be able to meditate. And so those first 2 categories of people are people in the world who are trapped, and all they can do is keep reincarnating and reincarnating. And Master said that as we reincarnate every 12 years, as the earth goes around the sun, we make a little step forward, just riding around on the back of the earth. But he wants to speed up that process for those who want to. So 12 Kriyas will do the same thing as going around the sun for 12 years. So think about that. If you want something efficient, I think Kriya is better than just that. So the third category of people are people in which most of us are in that third category. We're wanting to meditate, we're wanting to achieve calmness, but our minds vacillate between restless thoughts And so we focus a little bit, we concentrate a little bit, and then our minds are pulled off. And that we gradually, as we work at it, try to concentrate, do the techniques, and so on, we get more and more able to concentrate our minds. But we're still in that in-between state. Then the fourth state is when we're really able to concentrate our minds. And for this, we have to control the prana, which is why we have the techniques. I won't go into that because most of us know the techniques, know about controlling prana. But we have to withdraw the prana so that our minds become fixed on the object of meditation. Master said, I found fascinating. He said, if we can hold our minds in a fixed state without them wandering, if we can do that for 1 hour, we will go into the fourth state, which is basically we'll go into samadhi. So think about that. It's not such a terribly distant goal. You kind of think, oh, I've got to concentrate. But try to concentrate for an hour. Of course, you have to concentrate for a minute before you can concentrate for 60 minutes. But nonetheless, it's an achievable goal. So in meditation, all of meditation, our practices, our pranayamas, our kriyas, are in order to get the energy withdrawn and the mind focused so that we can hold that focus long enough, and then we pull away from the activity of chitta, the activity of the likes and dislikes. Those currents are neutralized. And when we do, Master said that is good enough for this life. He said that's the goal that we should have. And then the state beyond that is what he was in, which is nirvikalpa samadhi, where the feelings of the heart, the likes and the dislikes, become united with the soul bliss. And in soul bliss, there's no other desire. Those desires are just neutralized. But for us, our goal is to withdraw. Our inner freedom comes from withdrawing from the outer aspects and focusing inwardly.